so much for finding Channel Core. Let's do Megalopolis. Egads, this is a rough one. And to give you an idea, it's one of those rare movies that has both a 100 and a 0 Metascore. My intention for this channel is to somewhat focus on movies I'm mostly recommending, but this one is too big of a deal to ignore, what with the backstory of the director alone. For my real young viewers, Francis Ford Coppola wrote and directed this. He's in his mid-80s, and he's considered one of the all-time greatest directors for having made the Godfather Trilogy and Apocalypse Now, with other standouts being the slow-burn spy thriller The Conversation and the pretty great Bram Stoker's Dracula from the early 90s. Most of what he made in the 90s were flops, which combined with 9/11 for various reasons made studios unwilling to fund this project, which he's been trying to get off the ground for over 2 decades, but I guess it's more like 3 decades. Apparently the bulk of Coppola's massive fortune came from his winery, and he put well over $100 million into funding this himself, and it only made like $13 million globally. Yikes. This is one movie I almost wrote the review for, with having to admit that I couldn't finish it. But I went ahead and powered through, so I do actually know how it ends. Seriously, I do not think a single thing in this works. Even as a film nerd, I can't find reasons to give it art film excuses for being good, which means I can't imagine anyone of any age really being able to get into this. It's not very plot-driven, so there's nothing on that level pushing forward momentum on this, and even worse, the characters are all stiff, boring, cliche, and not sexy, developed, or remotely interesting. Even the musical score is clunky and forced. And yes, I did get the sense that bits of it were an intentional mix of carnivalesque and 1940s and 50s sounding, but it came across as more disorienting and unappealing than functional, let alone brilliantly clever or anything like that. As far as what's going on here, Adam Driver is a Nobel Prize-winning, semi-mad scientist guy who invented some revolutionary building material called Megalon, and he works for a city department called the Design Authority under Mayor Giancarlo Esposito. But their differing visions of the future of their city has renewed a rivalry between them. And yeah, I'm not even going to bother giving you the characters' names because they're all like ancient Rome-ish. It's just silly. So I'm going to use the actors' names if that's not obvious. Their backstory differences stem from the fact that previously as city DA, Esposito tried to convict Driver for murdering his missing wife who was never found, but he was acquitted. Driver is also having an affair with Aubrey Plaza, who, if I understood everything correctly, is both a high-profile reporter and wife of the richest man in the world, John Voight. Driver then meets Esposito's super hot daughter Julia at a big media event, and of course they don't like each other at first, but this becomes the bigger romance of the movie, even though again, we feel nothing for any of these characters or the drama that falls way short around them. Then of all bizarre things, Driver has the superpower to somehow freeze time on command, which not only does Julia witness, but she's the only other person not affected by the time freeze, at least in just like one scene we see earlier. His superpower then starts waning, I guess from alcoholism and whatever other stresses, and it regains strength only in her presence. Ugh. Then at over an hour in, the movie barely starts to become compelling when Esposito asks Driver to leave his daughter alone in exchange for secret information on what really happened to Driver's wife. Pardon a bit of a spoiler there again, but I truly doubt anyone will give a shit. The last bit of palace intrigue is with a super crass, out-of-nowhere Matrix type of scene where Plaza manipulates Voight's son, Shia LaBeouf, into attempting a corporate coup against his father because she has a prenup with him that prevents her from taking over his bank when he dies. This whole movie is supposed to be a retelling of the Catalanarian conspiracy of 63 BC. I'll let you guys look that up. And Megalopolis is supposed to be comparing the fall of Rome with the future of the United States. Even worse than anything is that at about halfway through this, as I was debating on whether to shut it off and write my review anyways, I started reading the Wikipedia plot summary to see if like a huge fight or war scene or something was coming, because that's what you do, only to discover that most of what I explained above was not coming through to me at all as a viewer. Like, I didn't get chunks of that, although they make sense as I'm looking at it, but About the worst insult I can really give is that it's like the script was given to a first-year film school student, or even someone who isn't a student, and they just didn't really know how to shoot this in an effectively narrative way. But then that said, and I should have mentioned this earlier, this whole movie, if you can call it that, is essentially nothing but bland and often expository dialogue scene after dialogue scene that's again not compelling. It's hard to find a scene that effectively turns or has engaging or compelling character development. And then even worse, as literally a self-admitted narrator, Lawrence Fishburne's character drops random voiceover that's supposed to help clear things up and sound philosophical, and it's just awful. It's just awful. Somehow an interesting looking trailer was pulled out of this, basically mostly from those cool looking giant moving statue shots that are not only few and far between, but are fantasy artsy images rather than being anything actual real in the movie. We still love you, Coppola. You're an influence and an inspiration to generations, but god damn, man. I will be absolutely shocked if anyone I know at least tries to make an argument for loving or even liking this, and as I mentioned, are honestly even able to get through half of it without shutting it off. Wow. Everyone's review is biased in some way. My opinions could totally change a week, a month, or years from now, so keep on loving what you love. Please give me a like before you forget, subscribe if you feel like choosing wisely, and let me know below if I missed something or got something right. They say comments really help a channel, but please do it in the nicest possible way because I'm a very, very fragile man-child.